Good evening and welcome to Ridgecrest Talk, the Thursday night edition. I'm here with my partner, Robert Eierman. I'm Al Huey. And our special guest we've been trying to get for a long time, former supervisor, 1st District, Mr. Jon. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Al? Robert?
Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Jon McQuiston. That's been, what, almost 2 years since you've left the seat?
A little over.
A little over?
Yeah.
Okay. How's life after 16 years as supervisor?
There is life.
Really?
After being a supervisor for...
You know, Robert and I were over there for the vote on the land management plan, and we saw you still walking around the halls over there.
Well, I do that. I can stay as politically active as I'd like, but life on this side of the dais is very good.
Yeah.
I participate in some of the civic groups, the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce, and I'm on that committee, and I always introduce myself to new committees as a recovering politician. But no, life is good, and 16 years was a lot of time, and realistically, after 16 years, you've implemented the things that you wanted to accomplish.
Hopefully.
Or you've set them in motion.
Yeah.
And barring some unforeseen, circumstances, they'll come to be. Some things just aren't doable politically. And when you kind of peel those layers back, the things that are left, it's not as much fun as it used to be, and you always need an infusion of new ideas and new energy. So it was time for me to, pursue what my next career may be, or no career. But no, I'm really enjoying it.
And speaking of, what are you doing these days?
I'm actually started a consulting business about a year and a half ago. Primarily advocacy and advice to people that either have businesses or want to start businesses in Kern County, just trying to help give a little bit of clarity. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of different departments that sometimes their responsibilities aren't really clearly understood. So I try to help and assist people that have either some personal or business interests in working through the maze of government here in Kern County.
Are you the business based in Bakersfield or over here, or?
Well, where I live is in Bakersfield. My clients are actually, I have clients here in the Indian Wells Valley, and I have clients in Bakersfield, and some that cover the entire state or multiple states. But geographically, my main office location is in Bakersfield, but I'm over here frequently.
Is it keeping you busy like you were when you were a supervisor? I imagine not.
It's keeping me busy, but the main difference is now, when you're in a political office, particularly as a county supervisor, it's still low enough in government where people have a desire and an expectation to be able to meet with you, to reach out to you.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And the district covered about 2,700 square miles, separated by the Sierra Nevadas.
Right.
So, the request for you to be in communities for community events, it was not uncommon. An average week, even though you're only in board session for a few hours, but I think all of the board members probably put in 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week.
Well,
Wow.
They might be in session for a few hours, but we witnessed 2 meetings that were marathon meetings.
Marathons.
I mean, we were totally impressed with the board on how they were so open to sit there and listen to people.
This board has always, and I'm always very proud of it, they really do care about what the people's opinion. They respect that opinion, and I think they do a very, very good job of taking the time and actually allowing people to express themselves, and they actually do take it into consideration. I don't think there's any board member that goes into a meeting that is just hard over. This is this is what I'm going to do. I can tell you from experience, there was a lot of meetings I went into thinking, based upon what I had heard, the information in the record, that this was where I was headed. But after listening to the public comment, and I think all of the board members reserve the right to change their mind based on what's said in front of them. And I've always been very proud of Kern County for that.
Yeah, the meetings that they conducted both here in Ridgecrest and also in Bakersfield, when they actually took the vote, they set the bar extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
The degree of professionalism, the degree of courtesy, the degree of understanding that they displayed, and the tolerance that they had for the length of some speakers, absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was extremely impressive. I mean, it didn't go the way we wanted, but you can't say that they didn't provide the venue in a very wonderful fashion.
And I've always felt that the board did a very good job. I mean, many of the issues are complex and controversial, and nobody's ever going to agree with every decision you make, but they've always been very good at taking comment, listening, and I think doing a good job of explaining their rationale.
Yes,
for why they're voting the way they are.
That was another point that they did extremely
Yes.
well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is even after, here in Ridgecrest, it was 7 hours after over 6 hours of public testimony, and then over an hour of them discussing it and making their comments about it. So that's a lengthy meeting.
Well, we're going to go to break here in about 30 seconds or so. When we come back, let's talk about a little bit, the last couple years that you were supervisor, because I sensed that you were really pushing to get some things done that was kind of on your checklist, and there are some things that I saw that I was really surprised and impressed to see just before you left office. So we'll take our break. We'll be back in just a few seconds. You're listening to Ridgecrest Talk. This is the Thursday night edition. And join us when we come back.
And welcome back to the Thursday evening edition of Ridgecrest Talk. Again, I'm Robert Eierman, along with our partner Al Huey, and this evening we're talking with former 1st District Supervisor Jon McQuiston. And you had something you were going to address.
Yeah.
With Jon.
Did you have anything you wanted to wrap up from the
No.
first break? Okay.
No, we're good.
I was talking to you during the break about, or even before we went to break, about the last 2 years you were in office. I saw some things, and in particular what I'm talking about, if anybody out there noticed, we got a lot of roads paved out in Kern, primarily the Kern area. And you were telling me that it was a pretty significant amount. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I will. When you look back, or when I look back on my 16 years on the board, one of the two most important to me accomplishments was what we were able to do in getting some paved roads in the Indian Wells Valley. And we actually started about 14 years ago, and there was some federal money under the congestion management and air quality pot of money, and because of dust, PM10 and the PM10 regulations, you could apply for a federal grant that was 88% funded by the federal government. So we set the precedent, had the roads commissioner's support, and applied for some of those grants, but it required a 12% local match, which we then worked with the Kern Air Pollution Control District. But our primary focus, you've lived here a lot of years, but you remember
I used to drive out in Kern Road because of our office that I was working at was on the at the airport out there. And so, and we had to start at 6 in the morning, so that was even before a lot of the people on the base had to start. But I remember driving out there, and you look off to the south, and it looked like a huge dust bowl coming up
It was.
in the morning.
Well, in the wintertime, and particularly in the winter, but the summer you get under that high pressure dome, and it doesn't let, there's no winds blowing, and it just holds that dust down. And what we did in order to justify getting the grants, we went out and we did traffic counts and we did soil analysis, and we actually computed based on the traffic count how many tons of PM10 we could keep out of the air.
Okay.
But it used to be every winter, you know, you had the Thule fog in Bakersfield and you had the Dust Bowl in Buttermilk Acres.
Right.
That doesn't exist anymore.
That's right, it does.
And that was completely done by doing those tests and analyzing where the traffic was and how we could eliminate a huge amount of PM10. Then, as we further refined it, we tried to do some infill, but then look at connectors that needed to be done, and there was a lot done in the last 2 years. But the Bowman Road, for example,
Right.
that
Yes.
came all the way through, that had been on the books for partially funded for several years. But when all was said and done, over about a 10-12 year period of taking advantage of that program, we were able to put down a little over 26 miles.
How many?
Over 26 miles of new roads built to county standards. And at the time we started, it was the first new county roads that had been constructed in Kern County in over 25 years.
Wow.
Because the budgets had, you know, with the ERAF funding shift, there just wasn't discretionary dollars to even maintain roads. But this was an infusion of federal and air district. And there were some people that didn't want to take advantage of it because they felt like it would affect their property tax, and we told them no. The assessor's not going to come out and reassess your land.
Oh,
And
I
they
see.
didn't.
But the property owners were worried that suddenly...
Some were.
Okay,
And,
gotcha.
and believe it or not, there were some people that just didn't want paved roads.
I believe that.
And wouldn't give us a dedication, and you see some little bends in some of the roads.
Uh-huh.
That's because they weren't public access easements. Many of them were created before the zoning ordinance, and they
Okay.
were private easements. But I would say all but a handful were happy to grant the easement in order to have the paved road to come in.
Well, anything else the last couple of years that you were there that you'd been working on for some time to get done before you left?
Those were the main ones. We also, because of the history with the city and the redevelopment agency, and the way the funds accrued to that, the county had dollars that had to be used in the redevelopment area, and it had to be, and we had that parcel of land that's now the Petroglyph Parks.
Right.
That for a lot of years, you know, all it did was collect trash bags from the stores, and it was we had just keeping it clean. And first impressions are lasting impressions when you come into a community.
Yes.
And so it was actually, while I was still on the board, they actually started some of the pre-construction with the restroom facility and the picnic area, and then after it was completed, and you know, it actually is a very beautiful location now.
Yeah.
I don't like the palm trees, but that was actually beyond my control before when we found out. I like the desert theme,
Yeah.
and someday maybe that will happen, but not having that big parcel of land full of sagebrush and plastic bags, I think has been a tremendous improvement.
It has, definitely, yes. It was in the newspaper just a little while ago that your wife Rachel is moving on from Ridgecrest and is going to take a job in Tracy.
That is correct.
She's currently the finance director for the city of Ridgecrest.
Right.
Right.
So that immediately leads to people thinking, well, I guess Jon McQuiston's out of here.
No, I'm still going to be over here. We have a home in Bakersfield, and we kept motorhome in a park, which was our apartment when we were over here. So, you know, the over 2 years she's been here, been making a commute. Tracy will be a little longer commute, but it'll be done by train.
Okay.
And for her, this was a tremendous career opportunity. And you know, I'm a pretty private person, but I'll share one of our conversations. That, you know, I've had two very rewarding careers, both in the Navy and being on the Kern County Board of Supervisor. But this was her career, and I did not want to be an impediment or impair her from doing whatever she wanted to do to have just as fulfilled a career as she wanted to have. So this was a very good opportunity for her. And but no, you're still going to see me over here. And,
okay. We have to cut, sorry. We'll be back right after the break. Please join us.
Welcome back. This is the last segment of Ridgecrest Talk here on Thursday nights. We're talking with former supervisor, 1st District, Jon McQuiston, about what life has been like since leaving supervisor's position. Let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the recent land management decision that was pretty much the main topic of discussion here in Ridgecrest and in New Kern since about February.
Yeah, I mean
there was information released before that, but
yes,
not as public information so much. I mean, some of the property owners knew about it, but pretty amazing. And I would say you could dicker, you know, a few numbers one way or another, but it was pretty much down the middle. Those in favor of it and those opposed to it. We don't want to talk about water under the bridge. I mean, the vote was the vote, you know.
The vote was the vote, that's right.
But how do you see this land management decision moving forward from here, and what maybe you would like to see with regards to the aquifer here?
well, first with the plan, I think it accomplished one very significant matter, and that is the basin is not in balance. And in terms of characterizing the basin itself, whether it's open basin or closed basin, I think there's substantial evidence that on both sides. Clearly, I don't think there's empirically one way you can prove it or not. Personally, I think that it's open to some extent, but even if that's the case, there's an imbalance. So the land management plan really essentially puts in place a process, if you will, and to begin bringing the basin into balance. At the time that the land management plan was initially developed, we didn't have the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And in reality, the only way local government can really address water consumption is through zoning, because certain types of zoning.
It wasn't loose term, maybe not the best term, blanket rezoning. We're talking tens of thousands of acres of land that the county rezoned initially. Actually, it was 100,000, but most of that was BLM and state land.
Right.
I'm talking primarily the private property owners. Isn't that unusual for a county, not necessarily Kern County, but any county, to rezone properties like that?
No, it's not unheard of at all. In fact, through when you develop a specific plan for an area, we did one of those.
When you're developing an area, yeah, but I mean,
yes,
we're talking about property that had been already zoned, and they're coming back decades later, sometimes many decades later, and now want to rezone it.
Well,
isn't that unusual?
No, I don't believe it is. We did a specific plan for the Kern River Valley, I'm going to say about 8-9 years ago, and that land had been zoned. Some of it since the zoning ordinance was put in place. Zoning is not a guarantee that the land is going to hold a particular designation forever. and as growth and people come in and uses and industry. But in this particular plan, there was rezoning done to look at future growth of water consumption once we have to put in place this groundwater sustainability plan. It wasn't a perfect solution. I don't think anybody believes that it was, but it is a significant statement that we're going to bring the basin in balance. The next step, I believe, is going to be the creation of the Groundwater Management Authority or some other entity that will bring the appropriate stakeholders together in order to develop this plan. And it has to be submitted, I want to say, for this valley by 2020, and the Central Valley is 2018. But they're in a more critical overdraft in the San Joaquin Valley than here.
I think we're 2022.
Yes.
But the plan, you have to allow 24 months for the Water Resources Board to review it.
I see what he's
So
saying.
it needs to be submitted. So forming the Groundwater Management Authority, the timing is good. The implementing regulations for the act itself still haven't been developed. But this plan...
And Robert and I were talking about this before the show. One of the biggest users in this debate has been the farmers over here, using the majority of the water. Yet they're not a part of the way the GSA is written. They're not a part of the participants. They're not like the water district or the county or the city.
I'm not sure what the
Isn't
county
that
is.
kind of a fault?
Well, the law in creating the groundwater management authorities limits it to essentially governmental entities.
That's what we were commenting.
But there's nothing that precludes any jurisdiction from establishing working groups, technical groups. There's got to be that type of participation, and frankly, the county itself, by having members of the Board of Supervisors on that, they pretty much represent everybody in the basin, whereas the city represents the city, the water district, their customers, so the county has really got the overarching. But what the land use plan does is it puts in place certain mechanisms to control the future water consumption at some point in time. And as I said, it's not perfect, but it can be changed, it can be adapted, and as the Groundwater Management Authority is developed and they start addressing bringing the basin into balance, then there may be some further adjustments. The study that was the Todd report really looked at what exists, and I'm hoping that the Groundwater Management Authority will look beyond what exists to things
I hope
like...
they look at more than the Todd report.
Well, but the Todd report, by what exists, is it really didn't look at addressing balance through perhaps increasing the supply or altering the way the supply is produced, things like blending. They suggested it.
Yes.
We only got 10 seconds left, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Well, so I think that it is a necessary step. It needed to be done in order to put as a placeholder for the Groundwater Management Authority.
All right.
And we'll be back next week with more Ridgecrest
Thanks,
Talk.
John.
Join us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.